Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network. This is our special Saturday edition called Step Up Your Game with Dan. I'm your host, Dan Hanford, and I'll be discussing topics to help you make better decisions to increase your productivity, increase your sales, and improve your overall marketing. Visit toughdecisions.net to sign up for our free weekly entrepreneur email. Before we get started, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com. Welcome to this Saturday edition called Step Up Your Game with Dan. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are going to be going over 5 stealth sales strategies to increase your productivity and sales. So first thing we want to talk about today is you need to be using stories when you are trying to sell a product or a service or, trying to find investors or donors or whatever the case may be. You need to be using stories. Stories grab people's attention, and they grab people's attention without sounding like you are trying to sell them something. As you move forward after listening to this episode, you'll see that some people do use stories when they're trying to sell and how it captivates you and how it kind of draws you in. Because when we start to use a story, it keeps people connected with you while you are talking about that story. One of the things I always kind of point to is why certain radio show hosts do better than others. Now, they're not necessarily trying to sell you anything, at least you don't think they are, but they actually are trying to sell you something. And so what they're trying to sell you on a radio show like Sean Hannity or Glenn Beck or, one of the other big ones, why they are so good is because they produce results for their advertisers. And the way they produce those results is that they will start a story and talk through that story, but then before they finish the story, and once they have your attention, they will pause for a break. And they'll have that commercial break. And because you don't want to miss when they come back and finish the end of that story, you always keep the radio on and listen to those advertisements. And it makes their advertisers, have very good results, and they want to continue to spend money with them. And so listen to them the next time. You'll understand that when you listen to them, they start stories, give you the sale, sell you with their advertisers in the middle, then they'll finish the story. And so their sales process is obviously, much different than everybody else. Everybody else, we might have, a product or a service that we're trying to sell somebody individually. And so we're trying to grab their attention when that person, that customer is in front of us. And so theirs is a little different, but it makes sense, though, as to why they do what they do and why they are so successful, because they start a story. And because we as humans are designed to want to have a complete story, have completeness, we don't want to be left with a hook, which you also see in TV. Every TV show at the end of every season leaves you with some sort of hook, so that you make sure you watch the next season. And even in between episodes, they leave you hooks, so that you will constantly stay connected to them. But we're not talking about hooks here, because hooks are a totally separate and different thing that we probably will talk about on a different episode on how to strategically use hooks in your sales. But these 5 stealth sales strategies, the first one here is using stories. And if you're interested in this topic, I would highly encourage you to pick up a book by Carmine Gallo. That book is called The Storyteller's Secret, and I read that, and it really changed the way I tell stories in my presentations. I use a lot of stories when I'm trying to sell something to an audience where I'm on stage, or I even sometimes will use that when talking and trying to train my staff and my medical practices to sell some services to patients so they can get stories behind why we do what we do. And that kind of leads us into the next strategy, which is giving people a reason why to do something. So just going to somebody and wanting to sell them something, they want to know, why should I do that? What's in it for me? And so I always say that everybody is walking around with an antenna on top of their head. That antenna is tuned into one radio station. And that radio station is tuned in to WIIFM. What's in it for me? And if you can't give that customer a reason why they need that particular product or service, or why yours is better than everybody else's, then they will not buy. People, are influenced, by having a reason. And so one of the other books that I would recommend you picking up is a book by Robert Cialdini. And I know we've talked about his book in the past. I would highly encourage you to pick his book up and read it. So it's called Influence. And in that book, Influence, he talks about a story of a researcher named Ellen Langer, and she's a Harvard psychologist. And one of the things that she did was she did an experiment on this, giving people reasons why they should do something. And so this particular researcher had some students that she called the experimenters, and those experimenters were trying to break in line with people waiting to use the copier in the library in this college. So this was at Harvard University. And so there were students waiting in line to use a copier in the library to, make copies, print things off, things like that. And there's a long line. Well, the experimenters would ask to get ahead in line. And they did it they asked it a couple of different ways. So the first experiment, the experimenter came up to the front of the line and said, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the copy machine because I'm in a rush?" And so after they did this over and over several different, many, dozens, if not hundreds of different iterations, they found that request, because it was coupled with a reason, it actually had a 94% success rate, which is powerful. Because the next experiment they did is the person came up to the front of the line and said, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine, or may I use the copier machine?" And this request actually had a major drop. It went from 94% when they gave the reason to only a 60% success rate when they didn't give a reason why they needed to break in line. Because all the people were standing in line because they had pages to copy and they needed to use the machine. So oddly enough, they still got a 60% success rate. But when they gave it a reason behind it, they got a big bump, almost at 100%. So they were at a 94% success when all they did was added, "because I'm in a rush." Now, you might look at that and go that maybe just because they added the words "I'm in a rush," that was the reason why they had that uptick in that success rate. I would stop there for just a minute, because Robert Cialdini in his book goes further on and talks about the third experiment that Ellen Langer had. And the next thing that they did was the experimenters came to the front of the line, and instead of saying those first 2 things, the "because I'm in a rush," or not giving a reason at all, they just basically gave a different reason, which really, when you hear it, it really wasn't a reason at all. So, because all of them in that line had that exact same reason for being there. But the third experiment was, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the copy machine because I have to make some copies?" Hello, everybody in that line was there to be able to use the copy machine to make copies. But what they found in that research is that just adding that little trigger word, "because," it caused them to have a high success rate. So even on that third experiment, just adding the word "because" and not even giving it an additional reason that everybody else didn't have, it caused them to have a 93% success rate just by adding that additional word. So when you're thinking about selling something or talking to people about it, make sure you give them a reason. Just using that word "because" can be very, very, very powerful. And so to kind of, figure out how you can use that in your own, business or in your ability to sell things, when you have a sale on something, like you're trying to, put something on sale, one of the things that you should do is always come up with a reason why you are selling it at that discount. Don't just put something on sale. You want to have a reason. Okay. So whether you have overstocked merchandise, whether you are doing a relocation sale or going out of business sale, all of those are good reasons, because people are skeptical. People, and we're going to talk about that in the next one, how, being specific is important because people are skeptical. But even, just putting something on sale, people are skeptical of that a lot of times. And so you need to give them a reason why you're putting it on sale. And so overstocked merchandise, relocating, things like that are all good reasons. And you also see, things like end of season sales where they're trying to liquidate merchandise from the prior season so they can make room for the new merchandise coming in. Those are all good, legitimate reasons that customers can latch onto and say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. There's a reason behind what they are doing. And you also have car dealerships. You see car dealerships use this all the time. They don't have just end of season. They have end of the month sales, and they have end of the 4th of July sales. And they have, obviously, when they have the new vehicles coming out, they try to get rid of the prior year vehicles and models so they can have the excuse of getting in the new ones coming in. And so you can study the car dealership industry and find a lot of good examples of how they use that reason why behind what they do. But whatever the reason is that you put something on sale, that you're selling something or discounting it or whatever, make sure you give them the true, honest reason. Tell your audience that, because the customers love to know what's going on behind the scenes in your business. They like to know what you're thinking. They want to know what is that reason why you do what you do. Don't be so mysterious. So we talked about how you should be using stories. And the number 2 was giving people a reason why behind what you do, and also giving them a reason why they should buy your product. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go forward. Number 3 is being specific. You must be specific when you're trying to sell something. People are skeptical by nature. And so giving specifics increases the likelihood that somebody is going to believe what you are telling them. So it increases that credibility. So a good example that I like to point to is the Ivory soap brand. When you look at their Ivory soap, packaging and their commercials and their advertisements, they don't say that they have a soap that is 100% pure. They say that it is 99.25% pure. And guess what? That makes it more believable. If they would have just said 100%, people would look at that and go, there is no way it could be 100%. But even though it's pretty close to 100% pure, they didn't put it at 100%. They wanted to be very specific and be very honest with their customers. And so they said 99.25%. And the Ivory soap brand today is a very, very solid brand. So the other thing you can think about too, and another example is when you discuss success rates with a particular product or service or whatever, go over those actual numbers. Don't round up or round down or whatever. Don't say, like if it's an 88.1% success rate, don't say it's, 88%, or don't say it's, 90%. You can round it like the first decimal, so it's 88.1 or something like that, but don't round it up to like 90%. It just is not as believable of a number. I'm in the online marketing space, and so I see a lot of online marketers trying to sell things, those shiny objects, and they'll use round numbers. Make $50,000 a month, in 60 days. Well, that's not really very specific, And so, but the ones that come out and they say, make $23,462.13 in 30 days, that's very specific, especially when they show checks or deposits or proof. It's a whole other lesson that we can get into about, sharing testimonials and sharing that proof, that social proof around what you're trying to sell. But this one is all about trying to be specific. Don't round up. And the more specific you can be, the more believable your customers will be. So number 4 is all about pre-framing objections. And so some people will call this overcoming objections, but I like to take care of objections that customers come up with before they actually have them. So I don't have to overcome the objection. I pre-frame the objections. So I know going into selling somebody something, what objections they are going to have, and then I come up with reasons why, or reasons behind how, not reasons, I come up with ways to overcome those objections before they're even brought up. So I call it pre-framing objections. So you want to make sure that when you're selling somebody a product or a service or widget or whatever the case is, you bring up and answer those objections because you know that they're going to be thinking it. Okay? So don't wait for them to bring it up. Go ahead and bring those objections up, especially the ones that make you look bad. Because if you could bring the ones that make you look bad up front, it diffuses them completely from the front and they don't have anything to like throw at you. Like if they say, well, the competitor down the street is much better than you, what do you say about that? Well, before you even start to have them asking questions, go ahead and bring up the competition down the street and talk about the reasons why you are so much better than them, or what you do differently that sets you apart, or whatever the case may be. I'm not saying bash your competition or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about bringing it up that there is competitors around town that do things differently, but here's what makes us different than them. They don't do this. They don't do that. They don't, all these other kind of, additional reasons. It gives people an excuse and a reason not to, use that other competitor. And you've already, diffused that objection that they're going to bring up later on down the road. So bring up those objections because they are thinking about them. And even if they don't ask those objections, they are thinking about it. And if you walk away without the sale and you don't overcome those objections or pre-frame those objections, you're going to lose that sale. So whenever you're writing copy or shooting a sales video, one of the easiest ways to handle these objections is to do a Q&A session, that questions and answer session, and come up with those questions ahead of time and answer them on the written form or on the video. Or I know a lot of people now are doing Facebook Live. And so you could do a Facebook or a YouTube Live and answer some of these questions and answers on those videos. So as you're selling a product on the Facebook Live or on the YouTube Live or whatever, you can, at the end, kind of prime the people who are watching your audience. You can prime them and tell them that at the end, we will have a time for questions and answers, and I will answer a lot of the objections that people have, not objections, but a lot of the questions that people have, when they think about using our service or product. And then at the end, answer those questions, do those questions and answers. And obviously when you're on a Facebook Live, I'm not too familiar with the YouTube Lives yet. I'm diving into that a little bit right now, but you have an interactivity component of that. So even as you're going throughout, they can be submitting questions that you could be answering in that Q&A session. But make sure that whenever you're discussing or trying to sell that product or service, you bring up those objections in your sales pitch, if you will, and answer those questions. So let's just recap here. Number one, use stories. Number two, give customers a reason why. Number three, be very specific in your sales. And then number four, be sure to pre-frame your objections before the customer brings them up. And number five is one that I like to use a lot, and it's called scarcity. And so people are motivated by the fear of missing out. We call it FOMO, F-O-M-O, fear of missing out. And you see this in sales a lot, but I know a lot of people that miss out on a lot of sales because they don't use these types of scarcity strategies. You see, a lot of people using deadlines for sales or limited quantity sales, or they'll sell a certain number of seats at an event or tickets to an event. And those work very well. And that's why people use them, because when there's a limited number and then once they're sold, you can't get any more, people have that fear of missing out, and it helps to motivate them to act and helps to motivate them to actually make a decision. One of the greatest examples of this is every year around the Christmas season, you see people putting products on sale but having a limited number of them. Remember a couple years back where they had Tickle Me Elmo? Everybody wanted that Tickle Me Elmo, and they knew they were going to have 30 or 40 per store. And so everybody was rushing to the stores. There's always a lot of, comedic bits to that too on different movies and shows. There are people, rushing in, trying to get in and fighting over the last Tickle Me Elmo or whatever. And, we also see it with the latest video game consoles and various things like that. But that is a good example of how you can use scarcity to drive sales. And when you use scarcity to drive sales, you can actually drive the price of the product up as well, because you can say that you have a certain number of them available at this price, and then the price goes up to this, and then it goes up to this until you're done selling all those particular products. So there's a lot of different ways on how to use scarcity, but whenever you're trying to sell something, try to figure out a way, is there a possibility of using scarcity? If you're selling, granite countertops, for example, and the way you could use scarcity there is obviously when there has to be a true scarcity in what you're trying to say. So if there's a limited number of those rocks or whatever, those granite countertops available, in your inventory, then you can say that we only have a limited number or a limited supply. And so once it's gone, it's gone. Or you could say something like, if you place your order today, by the end of the day today, or by the end of the day tomorrow, you let me know, then I can give you an additional 5% or 10% discount off the price, or, give you an upgraded, edge around the counter as an added upgrade. So there's always ways to add scarcity into whatever product or service you're doing. To give you an example, when we have a real estate, capital raising business where, we acquire large apartment complexes. So we have a company called Hanford Capital, and I'm sure some of you have heard of it. But in that business, we use scarcity as well. And it's kind of one of those things that the scarcity is kind of built in, because once we raise money for a deal, we had a deal in Houston, Texas that we did recently, and it was a $15.4 million property, and we were raising $4.3 million in order to buy the property and to be able to, do the renovations and upfit it and increase the NOI, which increased the price of the property to allow us to be able to sell it in 3 to 5 years and actually make a really nice return off of that. We're looking at about a 2 to 2.1 multiple on the initial equity. And so one of the things that scarcity is there is that we make an announcement that, all right, we need to raise $4.3 million. If you want to come in on this deal, you need to give us a soft commitment so we can give you the rest of the information on it, and that'll reserve your spot. And so if you don't give us that soft commitment, reserve your spot, then guess what? You're going to miss out on this deal. You're not going to be able to invest in this deal. And a lot of times those deals get taken up within 2 to 3 days. There's only a certain number of spots that are available for investors. And after a couple of days of us, promoting it to our investor group and our investors that work with us, they have that fear of missing out because they get this opportunity across them and they want to put their money somewhere so that their money can be working for them. And so we use that scarcity in that too, because after 2 or 3 days, once we have met the goal of raising a certain amount of money in a couple of days, we send an email out and tell the investors, all right, this deal is locked up. If you want to get on a waiting list, just in case somebody backs out, here's the way to do that. But you want to make sure that you use that scarcity. It definitely gets people to act a whole lot faster than just waiting. So make sure, you can set deadlines, and be sure that when you set a deadline, you're strict about it. Meaning, when you tell somebody that you're going to have only 10 products available or whatever, only sell those 10 products and that's it. If you tell somebody, the customers, that you're going to give them a discount if they order in the next 24 hours, well, once 24 hours is up, they don't get that discount anymore. You have to be strict about it. Otherwise, they won't believe it. Because in the future, you try to sell them something and give them that discount and give them a deadline. And then a week later, they call back and you give them that discount again. Well, guess what? It's not going to work. And word is going to get around that you bend over backwards and, don't, stand up to what your sales are. The next thing you can do is add bonuses to your products for like a limited time. Order, the next week, and we'll give you some additional training or additional video, training, or, additional, product or service or whatever the case may be. The biggest example that I could think of here is online affiliate marketers. Now, for those of you who don't know what an affiliate marketer is, an affiliate marketer is somebody who takes a product that's already out there. Let's give you an example. There's a product called ClickFunnels. And so ClickFunnels has people that helps market that product. And so they'll have somebody like, for example, me, that has an audience of people, listening to our podcast, and they'll come to us and they'll say, hey, we would like to promote our product with your listeners. And then in exchange, we will give you a commission, if you will, or an affiliate fee for selling our service. And so that's called an online affiliate marketer. Amazon does that as well. When we recommend books on our podcast, we put links to Amazon that go towards our what's called an affiliate marketing, tracker for us. And it's one of the ways that allows us to be able to pay for the production of this podcast is our listeners going and buying books or buying other products from our website. They can go to the show notes, click on those links, and it helps to pay for all the production of the show. And so that's what is called an online affiliate marketer. Well, online affiliate marketers use this adding bonuses or products all the time to be able to drive sales. They'll have a promotional where if you buy that particular, online product between now and the end of the week, or some sort of a deadline, they will add value to that product by giving you a coaching session, or they'll give you an additional sales strategy, PDF, or they'll give you access to jump on a call or a closed Facebook group. And so they're always trying to find ways to add value to those people who are buying that particular product or service. So let's recap real quick before we finish up. These are the 5 stealth sales strategies to increase in productivity in sales. Number 1 is using stories. Grab attention without sounding like you're selling. Number 2 is giving people a reason why. You need to give them a reason so that they don't have to think about it for themselves. Number 3 is being very, very, very specific. People are skeptical, and being specific increases your credibility with them. Number 4, which is the one I like the most, is pre-framing objections. Bring up and answer those objections because you know that they'll be thinking about it. So do it now and do it before they even start to bring it up. Number 5 is use scarcity. Making sure that you tap into the inherent fear of missing out, that FOMO that people have deep down inside. So be sure to visit our website, toughdecisions.net. On there, we have our free weekly entrepreneur email that you can sign up for. We really are trying to put a lot of time and energy and effort in that to provide a lot of value for you. So you can put your email in there on our website. It's usually on the sidebar at the very top. Just put your email in. And it's also at the very bottom of every single one of the pages to be able to sign up for our free weekly entrepreneur email. We're going to put in that email several different things. We're going to put some recaps of some of the podcasts that we're doing so that you can kind of see what they are before listening to them. We're also going to be putting in there some of our most favorite quotes that come from these podcasts, some inspiring business and entrepreneur quotes, links to the books that people recommend on these podcasts. You can always stay up with the latest books. And one of the things that we're adding to our interviews is asking people about their most favorite technology that they use in business. And so we're going to start putting those favorites inside of those weekly emails so you can see what other entrepreneurs are using every day that helps make their life easier. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of Step Up Your Game with Dan. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And until then, we'll see you on toughdecisions.net. Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.